that is also deserves to be struck out for petitioner's failure to join Honorable Adejo, chairman of Oloma Boro local government of Kogi State, accused by them of having led thugs at gunpoint to force electoral officers in named polling units in Oloma Boro local government to declare concluded elections in the said units cancelled, is well made. The petitioner's response that not only was no relief claimed by them against Honorable Adejo, he did not even participate, quote unquote, in the election, neither was he returned, so it's not a petition contemplated by Section 132 of the Electoral Act to be joined to an election petition. It's not a valid response. Section 133 of the Electoral Act only deals with the issue of which contestant of an election ought to be joined in an election petition by a co-contestant. It has nothing to do with the issue of joining of third parties against whom allegations of electoral infraction are made by practitioners, as in this case. Such petitions must be joined to the petition if the court is not to be exposed to the risk of infringing their fundamental right to fair hearing guaranteed by the Constitution. It is also of no moment that no relief was claimed against such persons in the petition. What is important is that allegations of electoral malpractice, which will require the court to make findings, including condemnation of the alleged conduct, where necessary, are made in the petition. Support for that position can be found in Wankwo and Yaradua, where Muntaka Kumasi JSC, after reproducing the provisions of the then newly enacted Section 1441, sub 2 of the Electoral Act, which is now Section 1332 of the Electoral Act 2022, and confirming that that provision had done away with the old regime of the Electoral Act that required petitioners to join all relevant electoral officers of INEC that conducted an impugned election. In addition to INEC, said, this is what his lordship said, he said, unless the conduct of a petitioner who is not an agent, or the conduct of a party who is not an agent of the commission is an issue, it will then be necessary to join such party as a necessary party to the petition in order to afford such party a fair hearing, end quote. As regards the consequence of failure to join such necessary parties on the petition itself, his lordship Kumasi again said as follows. However, where such a party is not made a party, it will not result into the old petition being struck out, but the particular allegation against such party is liable to be struck out, end quote. That is the fate of paragraph 129 of the petition, where allegations of electoral malpractice were made by the petitioners against Honorable Adejo, yet he was not cited in the petition. Incidentally, this is also one of the main reasons the Supreme Court gave in dismissing the appeal of the petitioners in the Odo State governorship case of Eitai Ojegede and another versus INEC, where allegations were made by the petitioners in that case against the then National Caretaker Committee chairman of the present head respondent APC, Governor Mai Malabuni of Yobe State, yet he was not joined to the petition by the petitioners. Paragraph 129 of the petition must therefore suffer striking out. For the same reason, paragraph 133 of the petition, where similar allegations of an alleged gun-toting Governor Yahaya Bello of Kogi State leading talks to compel cancellation of concluded elections in polling stations were made, yet he was not joined to the petition, must also be struck out. Paragraph 135 and 136 of the petition were not challenged by first respondents, so they are hereby skipped. I consider this a convenient point to consider paragraphs 137 and 142 of the petition, which learned senior counsel to INEC further complained was also barred for non-joinder. Counsel's argument this time was that the petitioners were also seeking in those two paragraphs to avoid the entire results of the presidential election in Lagos and Kano states, as declared by INEC, where Mr. Peter Obi of the Labour Party and Rabiu Musa Kwankwaso of the New Nigeria People's Party scored the majority of the lawful votes. Yet Peter Obi of the Labour Party and Rabiu Musa Kwankwaso were not joined to the petition, so those paragraphs were also barred and liable to be struck out. I consider this argument misconceived. In fact, it seems to overlook Section 134, sub 4 of the 1999 Constitution, stating expressly that, and I quote, for the purposes of an election to the office of president, the whole of the federation shall be regarded as one constituency, end quote. That is the position as it relates to a presidential election. Percentages of votes polled by presidential candidates in any of the 36 states of the federation or even the federal capital territory only become of consequence when the issue verges on whether the candidate returned also satisfied the provisions of Section 131B and 2 of the 1999 Constitution, as amended, requiring him to poll 25% of votes cast in at least two-thirds of the 36 states and the federal capital territory. Outside of that, how many votes a presidential candidate polled in any of the states of the country is of little significance in an election petition challenging return in a multi-party presidential election. It certainly has no bearing on the question of who an aggrieved party challenging a presidential election return should join to his petition among the candidates that contested the election with him. By Section 133 of the Electoral Act, the only other candidate in the election the petitioner can properly join to his petition is the person returned as the winner of the election. See further on this, the cases of Buhari and another versus Yusuf, Yusuf versus Obasanjo and 50 others, Obasanjo and Yusuf versus others. See particularly Buhari and another versus Yusuf, where it was said by, and I quote, by the Supreme Court, where it was said that, and I quote, an unsuccessful candidate in an election cannot be made a party to an election petition against his will, end quote. We also do not agree with first respondent that paragraphs 141, 41, and 142 of the petition were vague or imprecise. But I do not, sorry. I am rather of the view that facts necessary to elicit an appropriate response from the respondents of the electoral infractions complained of by the petitioners have been pleaded in those paragraphs. I, however, agree with first respondent that paragraph 142 of the petition, where the petitioner simply complained that first respondent deliberately entered wrong results. For 22 name states herein, paragraph 44, where they averred that there were discrepancies on very large scale at the various local governments, various levels of recording and collation of results, particularly between the polling units and the ward polling centers, without specifying the said polling units and ward collation centers, where these said, quote and unquote, large scale discrepancies took place. And paragraph 144, where petitioners gave notice that they would rely on their same flawed statisticians' report, among other documents they did not front load, are bad and liable to be struck out for vagueness. Paragraph 142 of the petition, where petitioners simply stated as ground 4 of their petition that the petitioners aver that second respondent was at the time of the election not qualified to contest the election, not having the constitutional threshold, quote and unquote, that is all they said. It is also imprecise and vague as it gives no particulars of any of the several qualifying and disqualifying factors set out in sections 131 and 137 of the Constitution. The main purpose of pleadings, as further fortified by paragraph 4 sub 1b of the first schedule of the Electoral Act, we repeat, is to properly and clearly inform the adverse party of the case is coming to meet, so that he can respond appropriately to it. That is fair hearing. That requirement of the law does not permit parties to keep their cards face down, as petitioners did in paragraph 146 of their petition, when they simply aver generally that second respondent was not qualified to contest the 25th February presidential election, without revealing in what form he was not qualified or disqualified for the election. That paragraph of the petition falls far short of the requirements of paragraph 41b of the first schedule of the Electoral Act, and so liable to be and must be struck out. Conclusion on issue 1 of first respondent, the sum total of all the foregoing is that while paragraphs 129 and 133 of the petition are liable to be struck out for non-joinder, to which Mrs. Adejo and Governor Yahaya Bello of Kogi State accused the petition of committing electoral malpractices, paragraphs 92, 95, 98, 11, 121, 126, 129, 133, 143, 144, and 146 are vague, imprecise, and lack particulars, and so fall short of the requirements of paragraph 41b. They are all therefore ordered struck out. Paragraphs 93, 94, 96, 97, 99, 100, 101, 102, 104, 105, 108, 109, 100, 111, 112, 113, 114, 115, 16, 118, 19, 120, 122, 125, 130, 134, 138, 139, 140, on the other hand, are in order and properly pleaded. Now, issue 2 of first respondent in this same application reads whether, having regard to the mandatory provisions of paragraph 41b of the first schedule of the Electoral Act, a reasonable course of action has been disclosed in respect of grounds of the petition contained in paragraph 16a, b, C and D of the petition to warrant further or any adjudication on same. Counsel on behalf of first respondent this time anchored the arguments principally on the grounds on which the petitioners founded their petition. Counsel reproduced paragraph 16a, b, and C of the petition where the petitioners alleged, we set them out. The next reference, section 134 of the Electoral Act, stating that an election may be questioned on, among others, that the election was invalid by reason of corrupt practices, and argue that this provision, that is section 134, has a proviso in section 135(1). So the fact that an election shall not be liable to be invalidated by reason of non-compliance with the provisions of the Act, if it appears the election tribunal occurred that the election was conducted substantially in compliance with the principles of the Act, and the non-compliance would have substantially affected the result of the election. Relying on the cases of Ojukwu and Yaradua and Yusuf versus George, Learned Counsel submitted that for petitioners to sustain their ground of corrupt practice and non-compliance of the election with the provisions of the Act, they are required to not only plead the fact of non-compliance, but further assert positively in the petition and prove that the non-compliance and corrupt practice complained of substantially affected the result of the election. To properly do that, they argued petitioners must plead and show how many votes were such votes would void the return of second respondent as the winner of the election. They said not only did the petitioners not assert in their petition that the non-compliance complained of substantially affected the election, they did not also plead the votes or polling units affected by non-compliance to enable this court to form an opinion on that non-compliance and corrupt practice complained of substantially affected the result, or that second respondent polled majority of lawful votes in the election and so ought to be returned. Without those facts in the petition, the petitioners' counsel submitted have simply blown quote-unquote muted trumpets and their petition lifeless and failed to disclose a substantial cause of action, so it is liable to be dismissed. Resolution of issue 2. This issue does not, in my view, deserve any serious consideration. The reason being that petitioners expressly stated in paragraph 17 of their petition that, quote, the petitioners aver that the election was not conducted in accordance with the provisions of the Electoral Act and other relevant laws, and that the non-compliance substantially affected the result of the election, in that the second respondent ought not to have been declared and returned as the winner of the election. That sufficiently answers the question of first respondent. Issues 2 and 3 and 4, the first respondent first application. The answer to first respondent, their issues 3 and 4, which they also argue together, basically relied on their contentions in issue 2 of the lifelessness of the petition to submit that the petition, as by reason of the alleged submission in the petition identified above, had become academic and constituted abuse of process of court, so this court is robbed of jurisdiction to entertain it. This combined issue is founded on issue 2, and since issue 2 has been determined against first respondent, issue 3 and 4 perish with it, and so are hereby resolved against first respondent. Now I come to second respondent similar application, seeking dismissal of paragraphs 14 and 15, 19 to 81. Okay. You didn't quite write it that way here. For this application, learned counsel second respondent simply said that the sole issue for determination, thus, which was that in view of the provision of paragraphs 14(1)(d) of the first schedule to the relevant Electoral Act and relevant judicial decisions, whether paragraphs 14